What's going on, everybody? It's Peaceful here. We are doing a deck guide today on my personal choice for best deck in the game right now. It is a Lockjaw Thanos ongoing deck. So before I get into any details, please hit that like button, subscribe. If you enjoy this type of content, these deck guides, and you want to see more of them, hitting that like button, subscribing, even throw down in the comments below maybe some decks you'd like to see me do. All of this really helps me get some visibility in the YouTube algorithm. It helps me grow as a content creator, and it gets my information out there for people to see. And I really would appreciate you doing that for me. So now let's go ahead and get into it. So like I said, this is about my current choice for best deck in the game. It is a Thanos ongoing Lockjaw deck, and I want to sort of talk about why this deck is good and what your game plan is. The reason this deck is good is because you have a deck that has a very proactive, very powerful, very tall, over the top game plan when it has a decent draw, that also just gets to use powerful tech cards proactively instead of reactively to lock up certain lanes and win the game. So you run Armor, and you run Cosmo, and you run Professor X. These are the three main ones I'm going to talk about. And basically, in the current metagame, Professor X is kind of like your second copy of both of them, except it also just guarantees you a win in a certain lane if you play it correctly. And what you're honestly trying to do is you're trying to maximize on the amount of discard decks you're seeing, the amount of destroy decks you're seeing, and the amount of Absorbing Man Brood and Silky Smooth decks you're seeing in the metagame. So obviously Armor, insane against destroy decks, but it's also really good against Silky Smooth, and it's also really good against a lot of the Absorbing Man Brood decks because they are often running Shang. And that just lets you have a free lane to play your Devil Dino into to just win that lane pretty much off of one card, and makes it really easy to win lanes. Cosmo's obviously insane in the metagame right now against destroy decks, against Absorbing Man Brood decks. It is just game over in that lane. It's going to make it basically impossible for them to contest that lane in any meaningful way. And it gives you a place where you're free of worrying about Enchantress, you're free of worrying about Shang. You can just stack Cosmo into Iron Man, into Onslaught, something like that, in order to win that lane pretty much for free. And then you really just have to find a way to win another lane. Like I said, usually with something like Devil Dino. The combination of these things, of having these really powerful tech cards that actually proactively push your game plan, makes this deck just incredibly hard for your opponent to counter. So to make sure you understand the purposes of each of these cards, I'm going to kind of go into it very briefly. You're generally trying to win one lane with Professor X or Devil Dino, and another lane with some combination of Iron Man, Claw, and Onslaught. So this combination of cards, just because of the way the power distributes pretty evenly across the lanes, it makes it really hard for your opponent to predict where they need to put their power. Use that information to your advantage and take advantage of when your opponent stumbles. Take advantage of when you get that Cosmo prediction, or when you have that Professor X to lock down the guaranteed lane they're going to put their Brood or Absorbing Man down into. This is another important thing I want to note. The reason I say that Professor X is basically your second Cosmo is because the most common thing you want to shut down right now with Cosmo is Absorbing Man or Brood. And Professor X says no cards get to go into this lane. So they play their Absorbing Man. As long as you have priority, you get to stop that. So one of the things I wanted to kind of touch on is the way to play this deck. First off, unlike a lot of control style decks, which I think I would consider this a control deck, you do not want to lose priority, right? You know, that's a pretty common thing with Sarah control. Your general thing is you are constantly trying to throw priority and only be winning one lane going into the last turn, because you want to be able to have that Shang and that Enchantress superiority. You want your tech cards to be able to go off your Killmonger, things like that, guaranteed, without having to worry about your opponent, protecting those by throwing priority. This deck's completely the opposite. You want priority, especially in the early turns, especially going into turn 4, because you want to be able to shut down a lot of these things with your Professor X, with your Cosmo, with your Armor. So focus on that. You play your stones pretty liberally. The only exceptions are Reality Stone and Time Stone. Ideally, if you have Lockjaw, you can include Space Stone in that category, but ideally, Reality Stone is only important to save against decks you know have magic. You really don't want to give your opponent the extra turn, even though you can kind of take advantage of it a lot of times. Your opponent built their deck around it, right? So you generally don't want to let your opponent do what they're trying to do. So if you can, always turn off magic after they've played it for Reality Stone. The other time you want to keep it is against decks with Storm. That's another big example. So you don't want to, same with Legion, right? We actually won a game today on stream where our opponent tried to Legion one of the negative debuffing locations to try and steal a Professor X lane from me, and I was able to Reality Stone it before it went off and just saved myself the game. So Ended up giving me 8 cubes. Just a lot of times where Reality Stone can be really, really clutch, especially because if you kind of hold it in hand, your opponent sort of assumes you don't have it, right? One of the things that people tend to believe is that if you have the Reality Stone, you're going to play it. And if they don't see it by turn 5 or 6, they kind of assume you don't have it because they're like, well, if they had it, they would have played it because you want to get that card draw as soon as possible. And while that can be true, this deck has so many powerful proactive threats that you generally have enough in your hand to win the lanes that you need to, and the Reality Stone's more powerful as that really sweet counter card that they're not expecting. So keep that in mind. Time Stone, you want to save till turn 3. That's the most important thing in the deck. You should only be playing Time Stone on turn 3 to ramp out your Professor X, to ramp out Iron Man, to ramp out Vision. Any of these cards are just really, really strong to ramp out early. Makes it really hard for your opponent to predict where they need to put power, especially if you get an X down. It makes it really hard for them to choose a lane to allocate power to, which means that you get the free reign on turn 5 to sort of start setting up your lane, and by then it's usually too late. So again, remember, keep priority. So because all these plays get a lot better when you have priority. Now, other than the stones, the only time the exception for time stone goes away is when you have Lockjaw. So one of the things I want to emphasize with this deck that's a little bit different is your game plan isn't Lockjaw. All right. Lockjaw for me is just upside. So like the reason I like it in this deck is you can set it up in the lane that you're not locking down with Cosmo or Armor, or you can set it up in a lane just to start cycling through your deck and try and find your key cards. And sometimes you find them by drawing into them from the stones, and sometimes you find them by just cheating them into play. Like this deck does not mind at all going Lockjaw on turn 3, Stone into Professor X on turn 4, and locking out a lane that your opponent was expecting to be able to win in. It's totally fine to pull Professor X. Another sweet thing is you can pull Iron Man and then just cycle through some of your stones, set up a 15 to 20 power lane that doesn't have anything that they can really interact with, and then just win very easily from there as well. The Lockjaw is just a value engine in this deck. It's to get through your cards, find your key tech cards that you need for the matchup that you're in, and help you set up your game plan. All right. Space Stone, remember, is very key in moving. Like, say you hit, for example, an Iron Man, and you really needed that Iron Man in this other lane where you want to set up to win. A lot of times we'll go turn 3 Lockjaw, turn 4 Stone on Lockjaw, Space Stone in the location where you know you're probably going to need something to help you win. And then you can play you follow up turn, you move over whatever you pull out, you play a Cosmo behind it, you have priority because again, you're fighting for priority, you want to be winning, and you just lock your opponent out of that location from being able to interact with what you're doing, and you're going to win that location because your cards just go bigger than theirs do generally. That's the main points for deck game plan. Let's summarize really quickly. Fight for priority, know what you need to do to win in a certain matchup. So, Cosmo against decks with big threats, not as good as Cosmo against decks with Absorbing Man, Brood, Silver Surfer, stuff like that. Um, Keep that in mind. Know what your game plan is. Snap aggressively when you have your nutty hands. Make them pay for staying. If they want to stay and see if their hand pans out, that's fine, because I believe in this deck enough to say that if you have Mind Stone and Lockjaw in your opening hand, you should be snapping on one, because it really, unless the next two locations literally both say you can't play here, you're just going to win most of those games. Like, you're just so favored in that situation that you should be snapping very aggressively and making your opponent pay the ultimate price, pay with their cubes for staying in that game with you. So I did want to touch on a couple of the card choices here. I wouldn't say they're flex spots, but the spots that I would say that you're probably okay to change if you want to mix up the deck a little bit are Jeff and Onslaught. I will say I think this is the optimal list. I've done a lot of testing with this deck. I've played a lot with this deck since I started brewing with it over the past weekend, and I really strongly believe Jeff is a really crucial card for this deck. If you have it, you should be running it. Now I will go over replacements a little bit later, so you know what you can kind of sub in there if you don't have Jeff yet. I know it's a bummer, but this more than a lot of other Professor X decks can actually survive without Lockjaw or without Jeff. It's really not as big of a deal. The reason I think Jeff is super helpful and super important in this deck is A, it's awesome to pull off a Lockjaw. Not awesome as in like it's one of the high rolls, but just like it's really nice. It's good utility. Like you hit Jeff, that gives you a free thing that you can move out of there and get just another roll on Lockjaw, right? So that's one of the things you want to maximize with this deck is you want to make sure if you play a Lockjaw on 3, you kind of want to get at least 2, maybe hopefully 3 triggers off of them. And this just maximizes the opportunity to do that, because that still lets you play, like if you want a Cosmo in that lane because you hit a big threat, this lets you play a stone, move Jeff, play a Cosmo, and now that Cosmo gets to stick. It doesn't get shuffled back in, and that lane is now protected from Enchantress or Shang-Chi or whatever it may be That's just one example of why I think Jeff's really good. That's the same reason Vision's very good. So the other reason I really love Vision right now, just in the metagame in general, is that it is uh, a point spread that you don't really know where it's going to end up, kind of like Silk, right? Silk is one of those weird cards where people are like, oh, it's a downside that it moves around, but actually it's kind of a good thing because then your opponent can't necessarily know exactly where it's going to end up. Well, Vision's kind of the same thing, right? Except you have way more control over it. So that's 8 power that is floating around on your board. It's honestly 16 power a lot of times for you that they can't necessarily predict because of Iron Man. And it's just a really good card to really mess with your opponent. And again, like it's a lot of what gives this deck power is your opponent not being able to know exactly what's going to happen next. So that's why I really like Vision. I really like Jeff. They just give you that extra utility. Plus, Jeff, as everybody knows, is really good with Professor X. You can play him into Professor X after X is down. You can move him into the X lane after X is there, etc., to get you that little extra power boost you might need. The other card, Onslaught. I love Onslaught in this deck. I've never been a big proponent of Onslaught. I always think it's kind of like a win more card in a lot of decks, but this is the first time I felt where it just has enough utility that it's just a good card in the deck because a lot of the times it just gives you, like I talked about, that flexibility in your opponent not being able to know what you're up to. This puts that into the stratosphere because a lot of times you can set up, say, a board. My favorite example right now is Iron Man on one lane, Claw next to it. That's a 12 power lane, right? You got Iron Man, he's 12 power. Okay. So now your opponent's like, well, 12 power, I can beat that. And if they play more into that lane, I'm going to win this other lane. And normally that might be true, but you have Onslaught, which when you play Onslaught onto a Claw, you're now giving 12 power to that lane, which then doubles Iron Man to 24. So now you have a single card in this lane, Iron Man, and this other lane, you just added an Onslaught to, which puts you up over, if you have any other cards there, you have 11 power alone with just Claw and Onslaught. That's a pretty big lane that your opponent has to contest, but you just made your Iron Man lane 24 power. And that's it's really good. And they can't Shang-Chi it. I mean, if they have Enchantress, they can Enchantress it, but a lot of times you can just Cosmo into Iron Man. All right, sorry. Now you don't get to do anything. Now this lane is protected and it's really, really hard for you to interact with it. So it just adds a lot of spice, right? Because like for in that example, right? So maybe they'd have Enchantress, right? And they're like, all right, well, I'm just gonna Enchantress this claw. And now Iron Man does nothing. If you know they have Enchantress and they snap you, it's like, okay, they have Enchantress for claw, right? That's probably gonna beat that. Because they can't Enchantress the Iron Man lane. Because if they don't have any power there yet, you're they have to also commit another card, which means they're not contesting any of your other lanes, right? 5 power still loses the 6, which is what Claw adds to that lane. So then you just go, they're going to Enchantress their Claw. So you're like, all right, well, they're going to Enchantress Claw. I play Onslaught into Iron Man. Well, now you have even more power in that Iron Man lane than you would have if you played it on Claw, but you avoided the Enchantress completely, right? So there's just like a lot of really cool stuff you can do with these cards that makes it really hard for your opponent to know what the right play and what the right move is, right? And just for the record, if they do decide to Enchantress your Iron Man, like your Onslaught comes down and it's 7 power, so Enchantress by itself doesn't beat Onslaught. Just throwing that out there. That's the power of this deck is that you're also putting down stats. You're not just getting the ongoings. These cards also have their own stats that your opponent has to account for and has to beat. And you just make it really difficult for them to do that between Armor, Cosmo, Professor X, and then all these ongoing effects that can affect so many different lanes, project so much power onto the board. So just keep that in mind. That's why I chose to have Onslaught in this deck. I think it adds enough to this deck, and it's definitely been better than Magneto for me. So if you decide to swap that out, let me know what you swap it out for. Let me know how it performs for you. I'd love to know. I'd love to see how that works out. Last up, I will go over replacements really quick. I think most of this deck people should have. Jeff, I think, is the main one that I've gotten comments on X or Twitter. Is that I can't wait to play this next week when I get Jeff, and I'm like, honestly, yeah, you can play this without Jeff. So the two recommendations I would give for that are Psylocke or Mr. Fantastic. Again, Mr. Fantastic is awesome with Onslaught, really good with Professor X. Just makes a pretty decent pull off of Lockjaw if you already have like a Cosmo set up on that lane, which does happen from time to time. You don't mind having Mr. Fantastic come out of there because it's for 3 cost, it's 6 power. That's pretty good if you put it in the middle. So that's a good one. Psylocke is okay. I don't love Psylocke in the sense that you are a Cosmo deck and you are trying to set up like one lane where you're using or where you're using your on reveals, and it's just having that as a pull off of Lockjaw feels real bad. So that's why I would maybe recommend trying Mr. Fantastic first, but either of those cards will work in that Jeff slot. Don't get me wrong, it will be worse. I do feel like Jeff adds enough to this deck that I slot him in. Like if I thought one of those cards was just genuinely better, I would play him. It is not end all be all, especially given that you have Claw and Vision and stuff to help with your Professor X lanes. So keep that in mind, and let me know what cards you try, how they work out, that sort of stuff. I would love to know. Other than that, I don't really have much else to add. I do think this deck is the best deck right now if you are trying to win rounds of conquest. It just has answers to everything in the metagame. It can go to toe with anything, even if there are a couple matchups that are slightly unfavored. And it's just a blast to play. Shutting down your opponent's plays, locking your opponents out of lanes, drawing through your deck, drawing extra cards, ramping. It's just all really fun stuff to do in Snap, and I really hope you all enjoy this deck. Let me know in the comments how you do with it. I've already had some awesome success stories I've seen on Twitter from people, so hope you enjoy it, and I'll catch you next time. It was just a mistake. Where do we think they're gonna go with their Shuri or whatever? Well, that's annoying. That was a tough call. I don't think it was, because like knowing what deck they were, it's so hard for them to contest the deep space. So like, I was already up by so much over there. All right, nice. I can move the claw over. That's really good. All right, we got him too. Oh, man, why did I not snap? Such a coward.
Squad still a little light.
Chat, why am I such a stinking coward? I like this. I mean, I'll snap now. I should have snapped earlier, but it's whatever. They stayed. Okay. Armor. Ooh, gifted a tier 1 sub to Glap. Jay, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you. Always freaking so generous with the subs. Glap, welcome. You are now officially part of the Peaceful Sea. Not that you weren't before, but you know. Yeah, man. That's how we roll. I'm surprised they stayed in too, but I'm glad I actually remembered to snap.
I am Iron Man.
Vision does not do it. I mean, we just go like this, and we even get to do this. Yeah. Does not beat. That's 10, 13, 16. That's 32. No, it's way more than that. 18 plus. No, it's 6, 9, 19, 22. It's 44. Oh, I know they can't Shang. Oh, you were talking. Oh, I see Jay asked. Nah, you're fine, dude. It's easy to forget. I mean, Cosmo's so adorable, you forget that it actually has a substantial impact on the game. Like, look how adorable Cosmo is.
Destiny will arrive.
I was gonna say, all right, Stone. All right, this is a rope snap. We have Lockjaw too. Is it actually turn 2 time Stone, turn 3 Lockjaw Soulstone? So we know what locations to use? I think it is actually. Kitty Pride. No! The worst pull. It's not turn 3, right? Jeff! What a beautiful, beautiful boy you are. That's all they did that turn? I think this will win. We go like this. Like this. 3, 5, 6. If it pulls anything it can pull other than the stones, wins us this location. This goes to 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. It doesn't win. That doesn't help over there. So actually, isn't this a win? They'd have to go both over here. I didn't do the math wrong, did I? No, I didn't. What? Huh?
Victory.
Well, I was playing around Kitty Task, but they chose to choose violence. We got a lot of info that game. It is the we don't change that, right? Isn't that good for us? Yeah, it's 100% tribunal. That's what I was gonna say. They're gonna magic that, so might as well let them try and magic it. Magic. Yep. Draw another stone, please. Oh, perfect. That was like the best draw. And we have priority, so I can reality stone it. They don't run Cosmo. I think we go like this. No. This one? Because we can claw here. There are stones, so we go like this and this. If they go tribunal here, 11. Dang. We actually lose to I guess we don't snap, huh? Because we actually lose to tribunal with this line. I can't play around it. I just say we don't snap. Whoa, that plays around it. That certainly plays around it. Okay,
Iron
sure.
Man.
Yeah. That works. Uh-huh. Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. than just Flub. Do you think about changing your name? I've thought about that too. Mostly because I'm tired of getting stream sniped.
Opponent snapped.
I mean, we don't have armor or Cosmo yet, but our hand is really good. So I'm staying. I won't snap back yet, but... Oh, you don't know to what? Yeah, that's fair. Guess we're lockjawing left. Okay, so Cosmo's still an amazing draw. Yep. Oh man, if we had Time Stone too, that's all right. This will still be good.
Oh, snap.
Sure, that's fine. You snapped over that? Seems odd. Dun, 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 dun. We can wait on that, right? We'll find out. We'll find out if this is greedy or not. Let's hit Time Stone so we can no, I'd rather hit something big, right? Oh no, they just went for it. Well, there's the Time Stone. Big thing, not a stone. Oh, Jeff. They're pretty shut down, right? But now what do we do? They've destroyed 3 cards, so death costs 5, so they could play death this turn. Probably over here, right? Oh yeah, no, that my cards too. Death costs 3, yeah. So they got a cheap death. So what about this? Death is gonna go over here, right? That just makes sense to me. Yeah. I'm assuming I win that one. Timestone Vision, yeah, that's always the play. And we just leave this here. We're actually pretty likely to miss. But what else do we do? 8, 11, 12. Yeah, we could we could go all in over here, but then like adjust ties. We need like specifically Iron Man, I think. Oh,
I
well,
am Iron
easy.
Man.
Just win, chat. Just win. Okay? Don't make it complicated. Just win.
Victory.
8, 11, 13. Oh no. Onslaught also did it, but it was a 2 out of 5. It was a 40%er. This deck is so good, man. Y'all need to be playing this deck. Telling you, it's so good against all of the meta
Destiny
decks.
will arrive.
It's amazing against Destroy. It's amazing against Absorbing Man, Brood. Man, I want to snap so bad. It goes against everything in me not to snap this. Do we believe in our matchup? I'm trying to think. Lammy says to be passive. I feel like I should probably respect the opinion of a person who's way smarter than me. Kind of glad I didn't snap now. This is awkward. What is the play here? Power Stone's never going to be online, so that's not an option. People said Untapped has a new layout? Say what? All right, I'll figure that out after this match. That would be awesome. We might just need to update. Lizard. So this is Shuri. So Cosmo's actively bad. Not thrilled about that. Can't use it for stream yet. Why not? Now I'm confused. Well, I just literally capture my overlay. I think we go Cosmo Iron Man here. How do they ever beat that? Killmonger, I guess, is bad. Time Stone, probably. That's just clogging our board so much. This is tough. I think I'm gonna Time Stone. I'm betting on this deck not having a, oh,
I am.
they also had an Iron Man? That sucks.
I am Iron Man. All systems
Wait,
go.
we still win. Right? Then that's 12. Bleeding Edge in the general settings. Okay. Did we snap this? Lizard's going to 1 power. So we're technically winning all 3 locations this way.
Opponent snapped.
Sure. Got him! Oh. Take that, Panda! Oh, they don't want to play anymore, chat. They don't want to play anymore. Anime on anime violence.